welcome back.
Recording.
To Talking Classic Talks on Spiritual Crusade. I am Todd, and this is my buddy Kevin. We are here, and we're going to be talking about some lessons I learned as a boy by Gordon B. Hinckley. He shared this talk in the early 90s, I want to say 93. And I would have been like 10 when I would have heard this, but I don't remember it. But yep. I certainly remember the Mormon Message. And I like to review that one every so often with my own kids when they used to have a primary talk back when church was a thing, where kids would go to church and give primary talks. We'd review it, and then the kids would kind of retell that story in their own words. It was a really easy talk to give, and it had multiple applications. But anyway, without further ado, we'll jump into it and see what we can discuss. Gordon B. Hinckley also, I don't know about you Kevin, you grew up with him just like I did, but he was just, he's like a grandpa. He was just like the funniest old old guy. You appreciated his spirit and what he brought to it. And you knew that he had gone through some things in his life.
Exactly.
As I grow older, I know that he was like in the first presidency for decades before he was a prophet. And, when Spencer W. Kimball was in poor health, he ran the show. And or was it Ezra Taft Benson? One of them was in poor health. And he kind of ran the show for a while. But anyway, the first story he kind of talks about was he talks about his stove that he had and his furnace in his home, and how they both ran off of coal. And if you wanted the house to be warm, if you wanted the house to be taken care of, you needed to continually feed that thing coal. And that's getting old timey. I work in a coal mine. It's all steel making metallurgical coal, but coal is black, it's dirty, and it's unforgiving. But he said, and he talks about how wonderful these things were, the benefit and improvement it was in their lives to have these things. But he said it was had a voracious appetite for coal, and there was no automatic stoker. The coal had to be shoveled into the furnace carefully and banked each night. And he learned a great lesson from that monster of a furnace. If you want to keep warm, you had to work the shovel. And I don't know about you, Kevin. My dad was pretty great at teaching this lesson as well. And not just stoking coal or any of that, but he taught the value of work. We would get truckload after truckload of firewood every single fall, and load up like crazy, like we were stocking for the second coming or something. Like it was food storage. We were getting so much wood.
Yeah.
And but we learned from a young age that even if you're 6, 7, 8, you grab a log and you bring it to the truck, and that's what you can do, and you pitch in. How about you?
Definitely. And so when we grew up, we actually heated with wood as well. We didn't have another source of heat, so it was wood heat. So we had our beautiful firewood stove, and similar to you, we'd get these loads of wood. We'd chainsaw them, split them, stack them. I remember being younger, my dad would split because it was way more efficient, and we had to stack, and just how terrible that was. But my dad was also an interesting guy, because at some point when he would finish splitting wood, right, this is probably 10 years old I'm at, he would always come and help stack after. So rather than just saying his job was done. So always looked forward to that part, because got to do a little bit less. But yeah, we definitely would work. And it's interesting how that comes out. I remember doing some service projects for some people, and they'd gotten a couple logging truckloads of firewood, which is a whole lot of firewood to split. And we did a church service project for this family. And we had a couple young guys that had done firewood. I was one of them. And we just destroyed. We just were so fast, so efficient. We got the whole logging truckload done. And some of the older gentlemen were coming up to us and just dumbfounded at how fast we were able to work, because we'd been taught.
Yeah.
I wasn't anything special. Neither were my buddies. We just we had lived with a family that we got taught how to do wood.
Yeah, and it's not difficult. There's an art to it or a skill to it that you need to learn.
Yep.
And
Yep.
my issue is in my whole life, because I always stacked or chopped. I used to go through an axe handle a year. They used to joke, because I would like just brute strength that axe handle or that axe head through the wood. But I would break an axe handle a year. So they kept harassing me. Finally, I went and bought my own axe, and I haven't broken that thing yet. It's weird how that works, but anyway, when I finally got around to chainsawing, it was when I bought my own chainsaw, and so I had zero experience with it, and so I'm teaching myself how to sharpen that thing, and for the first several years, it was like sawing all over the place. I couldn't cut a straight line, and my life depended on it. But slowly and surely, the chainsawing's getting better. I'm getting better quality chainsaws, and I'm taking care of it better. And but again, lessons you learn, right?
Yep.
He continues on. He keeps talking about lessons that he had, work he had. They had an orchard. They learned that pruning, how important pruning was. And there was a line in here. He talked about you could pretty well determine the kind of fruit you would pick in September by the way you pruned in February. The idea was to space the branches so that the fruit would be exposed to sunlight and air. And I thought that was interesting. Sunlight and air. To me, it is access to direct sunlight. So warmth and light. You can call that Jesus Christ. You can call it the gospel. In relation to us, right? And air to me is space to grow. You're not so regimented or so like bottlenecked that you can't really do anything, but that fruit has space to grow. Sunlight and air were two things that those fruit needed to grow and become good fruit. That was something I thought of when I was rereading this talk that I liked.
It's got so many applications. It's great. It's
a good analogy. And well, obviously the fruit analogies are plentiful in the scriptures. He talks about sick, people get sick. It's funny that when I was reviewing this the first time, it was a couple of months ago in preparation for a bishop's youth fireside I was giving. And there was a one specific story that I really liked that I wanted to share, but he talked about sick people, and I thought how appropriate that we have, we're living in a time where there's quarantining, where like when we were growing up, that wasn't a thing. There was no such thing as quarantining when I was a kid, but we've kind of come
never heard of it
full circle, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting how similar life, like history, just repeats itself over and over again. And we, at some point, think, hey, we're this evolved society, and we're so amazing and do so many awesome things. And then we still have the same problems that they had 100 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just a continual revolution.
And it's just a different name and a different whatever, but there's still, I guarantee you, back in those days, there was lots of media hype about this or that, to pro and con, or avoid this, avoid that. But I liked this line. He goes, the point of this story about people getting sick was the signs. The public health officer would come and put a sign on the front lawn saying, basically stay away. This family's sick. You come here at your own peril. This was a warning to anyone who might wish to come to our house, that they did so at their own peril. And I appreciated that. And he explains it. He goes, I learned something I have always remembered: to watch for signs of danger and evil and stay away. And in these days, the signs are plentiful if you're looking, and there are plenty of problems out there, plenty of adversity if we want to go find those things. But the prophets and church leaders and parents just lead and guide and try and encourage people away from those things. And those are signs, right?
Yeah.
If we choose to
Yeah, and
look at them. Sorry, go ahead.
it's so important to identify. And the thing about danger and evil is oftentimes it could be different for you and for me. Now, there are certain things that are specific signs that we know that, yeah, that's kind of dangerous for everyone, but it can be very different for Todd versus Kevin as to what dangerous or evil signs are for our specific circumstances in life. And that idea of watch for those and stay away, because sometimes we do watch for them.
Yeah.
We don't stay away. And so just the importance of not to just identify that this is something that you shouldn't do or should stay away from, but to also stay away from that.
Identify those triggers in our life that lead us towards those things, right?
Yeah.
And that triggers are that
Yeah.
sign, right? You know what? Hey, I'm getting frustrated here. You know, like I'm gonna start getting crabby with my kids and my wife and people and I need to be correcting myself. We talked a lot today in at church about course correcting and checking in, seeing where we are.
Oh, good.
And it was a neat discussion we had both in Word Council and then in our Sunday school lesson, our elders quorum led Sunday lesson about grounding ourselves and making sure we're doing the right things and what was it, course correcting and making sure we're in alignment with what we should be doing. Often we feel like we're doing pretty well, but are we? And I know myself, that's usually one of the first signs is when I start getting crabby. I know I got to start looking at, okay, what's going on in my life that I need to be correcting and being better. And often it takes a prayer and some quiet time and some repenting and a little bit of asking the Lord to, you got to take this from me, or you got to take this problem I'm having. I can't deal with it. Here, you take it. And, I can take it back later, but right now I just got to, focus on the most important things. And, identifying those signs and avoiding them, or not avoiding the signs, but avoiding, progressing past the sign or bypassing the sign is a lesson we all need to learn in life. And it's different.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting how some things that can be innocent to start out with can be those signs. And it's so important for us to be able to clue in and have those regular check-ins, that daily repentance, like President Nelson talks about.
Oh yeah. And I remember one time I was being, crabby or difficult at home, and I was talking to Jamie about what I could be doing better. And I said, I think what I need to do is change the music I'm listening to. And she was like, music? What is music going to have to do with any of it? But I said, I think it's driving the spirit away in my life. That there's just certain music, when I was a kid, I sure like listening to it. I still like listening to it, but it's not, edifying even a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it has bad language, but it's just loud enough and distracting enough, I guess, that it just drives the spirit away. And anyway,
so when did you stop listening to opera then, Todd?
Oh, I never stopped listening to opera. Those melodic tones, I don't know. I don't know anything about opera. I do like the occasional musical or the stage musicals, but I am not musical myself.
There you go.
So. Gordon B. Hinckley carries on. He talks about school and about how they dressed neatly. They basically were obedient and good listeners and focused on doing the right things. He talked about some of his friends growing up and some of the problems that they caused at school, and he learned not to judge his friends based off of some of the things they did when they were kids. I just mentioned this, I don't know when it was. I think it was in a testimony a while back about I grew up in this ward that I'm a bishop of now, and I'm so grateful. And it was, we were talking about sustaining a couple weeks ago in church. And I said, I'm personally grateful for that sustaining vote because First off, nobody's obligated to sustain anyone else. And growing up in this ward, I certainly have enough history with people that they would be totally justified in not sustaining me as a bishop. But I was grateful that they did, and it was meaningful for me. But anyway, these stories kind of talk about not judging people, or he has another friend who never really he was always a jokester, and he never really took life seriously, and he didn't focus on the most important things, and it eventually came to bite him in the end. And he goes that the lesson he learned from his friend was that he needs to take the serious things in life and the serious choices in life, those serious choices need to be made with much care and prayer. You don't want to be too flippant or quick with those choices, because it can go wrong pretty quick, almost like selling your house without having a new place to move into, which I know all about.
Classic.
This next story is the one I like. Sorry, Kevin, you got something?
Well, no, I was just going to say, like, all along, there's this theme of looking back at your life and saying, what can I learn from this? So we've all probably had similar situations where we could have learned stuff just in our day-to-day life, whether it's, interaction at school, as you're young, et cetera, et cetera. And then if we don't actually look back, though, and say, oh, what could I learn from this lesson so that I can avoid having to go through this? That's not much use. And so I love this, this reflection of his, this grandfatherly reflection.
Yeah, I actually had a similar thought in that. What are we doing? And it's something that kind of kicked my butt, because I'm not a good journaler or anything.
Yeah.
But maybe what I should start doing, or what anyone can start doing, is, we all have email addresses. Yep. Why don't we send ourselves an email and have a story when we think of it, and, save it, throw it over to a file, and then you just have it there.
Yeah.
And when you get enough of them together, you print them off, spiral bound them or whatever, and then you got a bunch of stories about your childhood for your kids or your spouse or for whoever, right? It's just not like you have to sit down and write a book for 3 months.
No. But if you have something written down, you'll be able to look back on and then add to it too, right? Like that's a great idea, Todd.
Yep. It was one I started to do years ago, and it kind of fell by the wayside. Which I would write my kids a letter once a year.
Yeah.
And I would email it to an email account I had dedicated for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wrote 2 letters, and then I haven't written a letter in like 6 years. But the idea was,
that's how it is.
When they turn older, here, I got an email address for you.
Yeah.
Here you go. And there's some emails in there, and they get it when they get it. But anyway, I've changed my strategy about what I'm going to write and how I'm going to communicate that info. But this next story, Gordon B. Hinckley shares, is the one I shared at my fireside at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, the next year we enrolled in junior high school. So he's in grade 7, or 7th grade in the States. They said the next building that they're supposed to move into didn't have enough room to accommodate for them all. So they had to actually go back to their primary school, which they didn't care for. He goes, we were insulted. We were furious.
Yeah.
We'd spent 6 unhappy years in that building, and we felt we deserved something better. So they decided they were going to do something about it. And the boys got together, and they determined they were going to go on strike. And so the next day they didn't show up. They just they milled about. They didn't go to school, but they went and milled about. And he says, Gordon B. Hinckley, in his way, he goes, we had no place to go. We couldn't stay home because our mothers would ask questions. We didn't go downtown to a show. We had no money. We didn't go to the park. We were afraid we might be seen by Mr. Clayton, the truancy officer. We didn't go behind the school fence and tell shady stories because we didn't know any. We'd never heard of such things as drugs, of anything of the kind. We just wandered about and wasted the day. The next day they went to school, and the principal stopped them and said, boys, I understand your frustration, but that's not how you deal with things. You are not allowed back in the school until you have a note from your parent. So then they all had to go home and get a note from their parent. And he said this was the most stinging rebuke he got. He explained to his mom why he needed a note, and she wrote it. She goes, "Dear Mr. Stearns," that's the principal, "please excuse Gordon's absence yesterday. His action was simply an impulse to follow the crowd." And it says she signed it, handed it to me. He went and gave it to the principal, but he goes, he learned a lesson that day to not follow the crowd. He needs to stand out and be different, whether he agrees with it or not. He needs to be his own man and not follow the crowd.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't even remember why I shared that in my bishop's the fireside there, but I can dig it up, and I'm sure it tied in seamlessly. But
Perfect.
It was he was in the 7th grade. I don't know. I don't remember some of the lessons I learned in the 7th grade, but that's a pretty important one because he's coming up into the formative years.
Well, and it's always important that we learn lessons when there's support available and when we're teachable, right? So like this is a young man who, and this has nothing to do with whether striking is good or bad. This is literally, that wasn't a solution. Did the principal want them back? Not a chance in the first place, right? He was done with those kids. They're gone.
Yeah.
This was just a tough situation. Like, and that's all. And the answer to deal with tough situation isn't to hide from it. Yeah. Like that's sort of the story, right? But to make your own choices based upon your merits. And it's so important though to be able to make that choice in a supportive environment. It reminds me of a story from I think I was grade 4. And so I was in grade 4, and in Canada, in the small elementary school I was in, we did split grades because it was such a small school. So I think in grade 2 and in grade 3, some of those classes were put together. The idea being that you'd have pretty much a full class of grade 2s and a couple grade 3s could join that class because there were too many grade 3s for one class by itself. And so this was in grade 4 though, so I was in a grade 3-4 split. And the teacher one day gave us juice for being good students. So we all had done something deserving of getting juice in class. And I was in grade 3, sorry. So in grade 3, that was like the biggest, most amazing thing, right? So the teacher's coming around, he's filling us all up cups with juice. And it was like just juice from concentrate, not anything special, but the teacher was giving us juice for being good students. He gets to the end and he says, "Did everybody get some?" Because he's got a little bit left. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be silly and say I didn't get any. So I raise my hand and I'm just thinking I'm the funniest guy in the world. So the teacher comes up to me and he fills my cup up with the end of it. Now he knew I had some, like he's not an idiot, but he used it as a teaching moment. So he fills my cup up and then he looks at the end of the juice box or the juice container and he says, "Oh, I guess there's none for me now." And at the age that I was, the relationship I had with this teacher, how teachable I was, that was one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned about being honest, just straight across, because I felt so bad that I had taken juice from my teacher and he wasn't able to get some because I had lied. Right? Like, but what a safe situation. And the reason the teacher did this is because he knew who I was and how I would react. But he let me make that choice. Didn't even scold me, just, "Oh, I guess I don't get any." But just what an effective lesson it was.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. And that's what's awesome about Mr. Stearns and about Gordon B. Hinckley's mom. In this moment, They didn't rant and rail. And that's I want to take every opportunity to drive home the point and get the whiteboard out and draw the plan and see, do you see what you did?
Yeah.
But you don't have to. And you can just let it be and follow the spirit and be mindful and just let that simple lesson be learned. And
Yeah. And it goes to show from a teacher's standpoint, right? Because we're all supposed to be master teachers, right? We're supposed to be like Christ, who's a master teacher. And I would say I'm similar to you, Todd, where it's like, I want to drive this point home. But if I could have had a million amazing lessons about how important it is to be honest, but this would have been way more effective because I came to the conclusion on my own of the consequences. Where like maybe we need to rethink how I parent.
Well, me too. Maybe it comes back to that pruning, where you were given the light and the space to learn that lesson. Right? Yeah. It's not like there was branches and twigs poking you and being like, see.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, lots of lessons, even and that's kind of what I took away from a lot of this too, is it's a lot of lessons for me and for us as fathers and for us as teachers.
Yeah.
Just so timely. And actually he talks at the very beginning of this lesson, he says he's going to speak to the boys, but he also says you old men can listen too if you want, or sleep, or sleep, whatever you want. He carries on. He goes, when he talked about this note that his mother wrote and how he goes, I determined then and there that I would make my own decisions on the basis of their merits and my standards and not be pushed in one direction or another by those around me. That decision has blessed my life many times, sometimes in very uncomfortable circumstances. It has kept me from doing some things which, if indulged in, could at worst have resulted in serious injury and trouble, and at best would have cost me my self-respect. So he always maintained the high ground, and he always, kept himself safe spiritually and physically, because he learned this lesson as a 13-year-old. But so important. He carried on. He talks about his father. He goes, his father had a horse and buggy, mostly growing up, and then eventually he got a Model T. And now he compares the Model T compared to the new vehicles and says it was a crude, dusty, dirty machine that barely worked and was cantankerous and problematic. But he goes, you learned what you needed to do to make that car work properly. And there's a line in it about preparation. He goes, from that car, I learned a few simple things about making preparation to save trouble. And how important of a lesson is that for us today?
Yeah.
How often is a little bit of, what's the line about preparation? An ounce of preparation saves, or an ounce of prevention?
Something about spoonful of sugar?
Makes the medicine go down? I can't remember. I think it was an ounce of prevention saves a pound of I don't know, repair. I'm gonna remember it like at 3 a.m. tonight. That's what it was.
You're gonna wake up.
I'm such an idiot.
And then you won't be able to go back to sleep. Yeah,
I should have prepared better.
I actually had since I baptized my youngest daughter this weekend, I had a discussion with a member of the bishopric who was up there talking about how I'm wired is that I don't like leaving things till the end. I don't like that feeling, that anxiety that comes up. So I like to prepare. And one of the reasons that you prepare though is you get rid of some of the problems. You're able to just avoid those problems. It's just a complete true fact in life. Whether it's going to do a Zoom baptism for the first time, you're able to make sure that stuff's going to work. Right? Yep. But if you wait until the starting time of the baptism, it's going to be a gong show. And preparation is so important. It saves you so much trouble.
I can't tell you how many times I've called my wife and been like, hey, can you log into this Zoom meeting and make sure everything's going to work? Because of that, because of times when it didn't. And not no fault of our own, but there was an equipment failure. We had an audio sound system fail right before church started. And we're like, how, so we, anyway, it was like 15 minutes before, and everything worked fine. And then we left the room and came back, and now there's a buzz. Are you kidding me? But anyway, it's about learning, and it's about figuring out and preparing, helps a ton.
Yeah.
And I like it. It very neatly moves into this part where he talks about work.
Yeah.
Because he talks about his lights, and he goes, back in those days there was no battery. Now we have an alternator that feeds the battery and maintains a certain voltage. Back then they didn't have a battery. You had to hand crank your Model T, and you're basically relying on the alternator or a magneto to provide your power for your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that thing has magnets, and there's only so many poles on that motor, and as it spins, that's how well your lights are going to work. And the faster it spins, the brighter your lights are going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I learned that if the engine was running fast, the lights were bright. If the engine slowed, the lights became sickly yellow. I learned that if you wanted to see ahead as you were going down the road, you had to keep the engine running at a fast clip. So just as I discovered, it is with our lives. Industry, enthusiasm, and hard work lead to enlightened progress. It brightens up our way. You have to stay on your feet and keep moving if you're going to have light in your life. And so it is with preparation. When we're prepared for something, things are going to run smoother. We're going to be enlightened and have that ability to move forward and deal with hiccups.
Yeah.
But I like that. And it's always been, I'll never buy a Model T. I always thought it'd be fun to buy like an old 40s or 50s type vehicle. It's just kind of new enough, but old enough. But that's one day when I become independently wealthy and I just want to keep busy, I'll buy one of those and just keep myself busy. But
there you go.
I don't have time to do anything, so I can't imagine picking up another hobby right
now. That also goes in with talking about if you're busy, you're working hard, you'll have, enlightenment. And it talking about too, when you put in the effort of pruning in February, you'll have good fruit in September, and just how that all goes together, right? And it's wonderful when we're able to learn lessons, but then we can see how they apply in different facets of our life. It's not just one thing. It's not like if you just do this one thing, life's great. There's all these many different ways to do things, whether it's doing preparation, it's actually being diligent in your scripture study, et cetera, et cetera. There's many ways to have a good, fulfilled life.
And it's and so it is with the gospel. There's everything bleeds into each other.
Yeah.
And that's where that checks and balances is so important, to make sure we're doing all the things, because if we take one thing out, it affects the other things. And,
that's right.
Just make sure we're doing the important things, and then the other things, the rebuilding the old 1950s pickup, or running my hockey league or whatever, all these other things. If we have time, we fit them in, great. And hobbies aren't bad. But to quote who is it? He was at the youth conference just before COVID shut everything down. The fall before COVID shut everything down. Steve Scott, and he quoted a general authority when they said it, and I think it was actually quoted at this last general conference. But it was a distraction does not have to be evil to be effective.
Gotcha. Yep.
That's what I keep saying. I keep reminding people, focus on the most important things first, and then everything else will fall in.
Yeah.
He carried on. He says, we talked about family home evening. They were not good singers. They were not good performers, but their father or their parents decided they were going to follow Joseph F. Smith's request that families have family home evening. So they insisted that they were going to do it. And they listened to Bible and Book of Mormon stories. His dad told stories. They sang, they danced, they had fun, but they did it together as a family. Was the most important thing. And this is probably the most important, or not important, most well-known lesson or story from this talk that his father shared. And it's the one where the two boys were walking along. They found an old coat and a badly worn pair of shoes on the roadside. And they saw the owner of those shoes working in the field. And one of the boys suggested, hey, we should hide his stuff and see what happens. play a prank on him.
Yeah.
And the older boy thought that would not be so good. The owner must be a poor man, looking at his shoes and his coat. And so they discussed it. They decided they would play a prank, but it would be a good one. They put a silver dollar in each shoe, went and hid, and see what he did when he discovered the money. He said that pretty soon the man returned, put on his coat, slipped one foot in, found $1, was kind of stunned, looking around, put his foot in the other one, noticed, something in there, took, rooted around, found another $1. He had, these two silver dollars, and my first thought is, this is like turn of the century, 1800s, 1900s. Silver dollars, I imagine, was like $20. Now, these kids are running around with, $20 or $50 or just handing it off. I'd be mad at my kids if they did that.
Just load it.
What are you doing, kids? Money doesn't grow on a tree. But the lesson is way more important. But the man was overwhelmed. He knelt down and offered a loud prayer of thanksgiving. And so the boys got to hear his prayer. And he talked about his wife who was sick, his kids who were hungry because they didn't have food. And he fervently thanked the Lord for this bounty from unknown hands and evoked the blessing of heaven upon those who gave him this needed help. The boys remained hidden until he had gone, and they had been touched by his prayer and felt something warm within their hearts. And as they left to walk down the road, one said to the other, "Now, don't you have a good feeling?" And just such an impactful story, such an impactful, lesson to learn and to be told, even secondhand, about the importance of just going about doing good.
Yeah. And having those friendships that uplift, right? That goal of uplifting, right? Because obviously we're all in different, stages of life. And oftentimes we might come up with something, oh, that'd be fun. Let's pull a little prank. Like, Todd, you and I understand that completely.
I completely get it.
Completely. And, there are definitely some times where it's like with your brothers or a close friend who, that's what you do. There's obviously nothing wrong with that. But that idea of uplifting and lifting up our fellow brothers and sisters rather than having a joke at their expense. Like, I just look at, sometimes it's fun to laugh, but when you watch this Mormon ad that the church did with this is like tear fest every time I watch it. Like, it's just such a great feeling, such a well done video as well. But it's just such a great feeling to see when you help a fellow brother or sister. Like, it's just amazing.
And what I loved is earlier Gordon B. Hinckley talks about following the crowd. And now we have an instance where one boy suggests they do something, and the other boy actually kind of sticks up and says, "No, that's not right," and doesn't do it doesn't rebuke them and doesn't shame them or doesn't do any of that. They talk about what they could do that's better. And so I appreciated that like he had enough fortitude or enough strength to speak up. They were good enough friends that they could do that and were open to do that. And made this, I guarantee it was inspired, and he was in tune enough to do this, to follow through with it. And he didn't know why he was putting silver dollars in, just they thought it was a good prank, right? There was a hashtag floating around a while back, a couple of years ago, that I liked. It was called "Do Good Recklessly." Hashtag do good recklessly. And I actually, this last summer when we went on our canoe trip, I named the boat that. I had, and spray painted it on there with stencils, and it looked pretty good. But and that's what I think of when I read this story. It's doing good recklessly, like just not caring about the consequences and just doing good. And whether it's paying for somebody's groceries and not worrying about whether it's a scam or not worrying about the $20. It's not about the $20. It's about serving and loving. And if we could focus less about the money or less about the physical things on it, we can really make a huge difference in people's lives.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's giving up of ourselves, right? Which is what we're commanded to do, give up of ourselves. And when we do that, though, it's amazing. So like in this question, we go back to it, like you got a silver dollar, you could have bought whatever. If it's like 20 or 50 bucks for us, could go out to A&W, or, you know what I mean? Like oh no, I missed going out to A&W once. But just the act of giving, and it doesn't have to be financial, obviously, but just the act of giving, how it benefits us so much more when we give. Like, to be a part of this and watch like someone actually legit become overwhelmed and need help, like that would be just an amazing feeling, much more than me attending even a hockey game, right? Like it's just, it's not even in the same idea, not even in the same realm.
It's about that care and attention, right? And I think of the movie The Kid. I don't know if you remember the kid, Bruce Willis. And the dad invites his son to come and help him move, and he sends him a check for like to pay for some movers. And he's like, it's not about the movers, it's not about moving the boxes, it's about the time and spending the time. And this lesson is learned throughout the movie. And and there's a quote, again, I'm going to slaughter it, about a busy man's time. And if someone who's busy, if they can make time for you, it's that much more meaningful. If somebody who, like the widow's mite, doesn't have a lot of money, but it gives up their time and their resources, what little they have, how much more meaningful is it? And we can appreciate that, and just going about doing good, right? Doing good recklessly, and not making ourselves broke or homeless or whatever, taking care of ourselves as well, but doing what we can do. Gordon B. Hinckley continues. He talks about his father and his mother, and this is one thing that I took home. He talks about his home. In that old home, we knew that our father loved our mother. That was another of the great lessons of my boyhood. I have no recollection of ever hearing him speak unkindly to her or of her. He encourages her in her individual church activities and in neighborhood and civic responsibilities. He carries on, but he just says, and she likewise encouraged him, but like just the parents were loving. They were respectful of each other, as they should be. They're each other's person. Your spouse should be your person, and you should be your spouse's number one fan, not critic. And Jamie and I often talk about that. We do tease each other and heckle each other, and we always check in with each other to make sure that wasn't not over the line, but that it was what was said was acceptable or okay. And more so myself than her.
What?
usually she just calls me a big dumb idiot, but it's in a joking way, and I don't mind because because I love her. But and my kids know that I'm a big meathead, so they totally know that she's joking, but they know that I love my wife, and I regularly remind them that she's my number one. They are my number. All four of them are tied for my number two. And if they're rude to my wife, it doesn't stand. And we go and deal with this right now. We have multiple stories where they were unkind to mom, so they get to deal with dad. And I don't punish them. I just take them into the mountains and hike them to death, to near starvation and freezing.
And that's why you only have 3 kids now.
That's why I have spares, so that when I do those, no, just kidding. And usually I pay for those things more than my kids do.
Well, and it's the importance of uplifting completely, right? Completely importance of uplifting. And our purpose as spouses is to, my internet connection is unstable. Yes. Our purpose as spouses is to love each other, to grow with each other, to be awesome. And we forget that. Sometimes we forget that there's a reason you're with this person. So like you said, it's important that regular check-in. It's important regular date nights. It's important But it's also important to show kids this, to show kids what a healthy relationship should look like and how it can be fun, right? Because lots of times raising kids isn't as fun as we would hope it would be, but we can still show that our family that even when times are tough and life's hard and we're going through trials like not having a place to live, that we can still have relationships and have fun and joy and still treat people okay even when we're stressed.
And making time, right? You know, again, we all know in families, in marriage relationships, we are keenly aware of how busy each other are. And our kids have a kind of a good idea of how busy we are, but you know, you need time with your spouse and you need time for your kids, and they need to know that they are a priority.
Yep.
And Gordon B. Hinckley, he says, we felt that my parents loved each other. They made time for us. They loved us. Like these were bedrocks of their childhood. And so that's a lesson we can take away, that like, how important is that? He talks about broken homes and how he, you know, his heart aches for people who forget that husband and wife should be number one, and they should be really supporting each other and being, you know, there for their children. And you know, they forget, they get distracted and they forget. He goes, none of this tragedy is necessary. I know it is not. The answer to our problems lies in following the simple gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who brought into the world his Father's love. But you know, it's tough. It's tough to do all the things all the time. But if we can focus on the most important things, if we can focus on learning the lessons, like when we do fall short, that's what we're here for. We're not here to like, you know, fly happily through life with all sunshines and rainbows and then expect to make it into the celestial kingdom, you know, and you know, without any problems. The problems are what's going to make us, right?
Yeah, make us grow. Well, and it's important, just sort of ending with this topic of making sure your kids know that you love your spouse and that you love them, is that we do some things that we say, I love my kids and I do it this way, right? So maybe I'm going to invite them to do this with me. One of my daughters likes to watch movies, so in order to show love, I watch movies with her, right? Like that's just, but we also need to make sure that they realize sometimes that this is a show, this is how we're showing love.
Yeah.
Right? Because we could be doing our best, we could be showing them love all these different ways, and they might not ever realize that unless we take the time and say, hey, this is, you know, we're doing this because I love you. I was busy, I've chosen you first. I'm happy to choose you first, and it's important to do that next step. I'm reminded of a picture a buddy of mine showed me where it's got the mom holding up the baby, like with the baby in the face like this, and the baby's all smiling looking at it, and then the father's holding the mom up so that she can do this for the baby, right? It's a classic dad behind the scenes, which isn't necessarily a true stereotype, but the idea being that we still need to make sure that people are aware of that this is how I'm showing love. Yes, I love you because I'm doing this. Yeah,
and it's and doing those things is so important. And I read a book this last week, and it talks about being the person you were when you got married, basically. The book is called Wild at Heart. I listened to it and at work, which isn't the best place to listen to books because you miss half of what's said, but basically talked about, you know, like we are who we are, and then we get like tamed. And the point is to not be that tamed. You know, you tame the things you need to tame, but still be true to yourself. And he goes, he's a counselor, and he said so many marriage counseling that he does, wives complain about there's no passion in the marriage, but then most of the counseling revolves around how she's worked for, you know, years and years and years to weed all these bad habits out of her husband and all these bad activities and all these, not bad activities, but things she didn't approve of. So she's basically neutered him and then complains that he's neutered. And anyway, so it says we just need to reclaim that a little bit. We don't have to go crazy, but like, you know, if you want to ride a motorcycle, ride a motorcycle. If you want to go play rec hockey, go play rec hockey. If you want to go hike into the mountains, go hike into the mountains. Like it's what makes you you, and helps you to be who you need to be. And then when you regain your passion, you can regain, you know, that passion kind of rekindles in your marriage as well. It goes a long way. And but being the person,
and that can definitely go both ways.
Yeah. And you know,
Yeah.
and you want to be that person for your kids too. You don't want to be a watered down version of yourself for your kids. You want to be the best version of yourself.
Oh, for sure. And it's important that you do that stuff. And we all get tamed. Like even without a spouse that tries to tame us, we just naturally get tamed as we get older. Right? Whether it's as I was telling you,
our backs out.
Trying to skateboard with my kids, never skateboarding before, and then crashing and fracturing my rib this past week. When I hit, it hurt so bad. I'm like, I don't think I've had a pain like this since I was a teenager. Why? Because I specifically avoid doing stupid stuff like this.
Wait a minute, that was the last time I skateboarded.
Yeah, right. Like, so we automatically tame ourselves, but it's so important to have passion.
Yeah.
In whatever that is. Yeah, it's great. That's a great comment.
Yeah, it's anyway, it was an interesting book, interesting read. I didn't necessarily agree with everything, but you know, it was a good one, and we need to let our spouse know their priority, let our kids know their priority. We need to let our kids know what our priorities are. We need to be sharing the lessons we learned with our kids. They may still think we're old, you know, like we thought Gordon B. Hinckley was a fun old grandpa. And you know, the lessons are valuable, and you know, we need to record them. We need to, you know, have them be a present part of our lives and our kids' lives, and learn from them. That's the point. We don't want to have the same lessons over and over and over again because we refuse to learn.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The purpose. The whole point is to learn and be better.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have for this lesson, or this talk.
Perfect.
It was a good one. I like Gordon B. Hinckley. It was long overdue for us to cover one of his talks.
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you guys. Yeah, Kevin, you have anything you want to add? Anything you want to wrap up?
I think we're good. Nailed it. Gordon B. Hinckley, he's obviously the prophet we grew up with. So, boom.
Yep. He's a good guy. We like him. If you guys have anything you want us to cover, just make a comment, or send us a whatever. Send us a comment, or check us out on spiritualcrusade.com. There's lots of other videos. There's what else is there? There's spiritual quotes that are shared regularly. There are blogs and other podcasts, and there's really good media on there that helps uplift and inspire. I was on there just last week, reading some of the stuff, and I was taking notes, and I was like, I got to remember that one. I got to remember that one too. I shared a spiritual thought in Ward Council that I poached directly off Spiritual Crusade, from about a month ago. This was a couple weeks back, but it's good, and it's uplifted my day, and it's benefited me. So take time, check it out, and we'll see you guys in a month.